today's gospel lesson, we have part of Jesus' last words to his friends. He knows that he is talking to his disciples for the last time. The soldiers will be coming soon. For these last Sundays of Eastertide, we do not hear accounts of the resurrection, but rather parts of this last talk, the farewell discourse from the Gospel according to John. The author of John's Gospel wrote down these words long after the events he describes. John's community had been expelled from the synagogues, rejected by those closest to them for proclaiming Jesus as the Messiah. By the time this written record was compiled, the words and works of Jesus were probably only a memory. Most, if not all, of the original disciples were dead. The temple in Jerusalem had been destroyed. For many, this event was a sign that the end time was near, but it wasn't. The end time didn't come. Life just went on, which in many ways must have been the hardest part of all. Where is Jesus? Isn't he coming back as he said? Do you think he has forgotten us? Can we still love him now that he is gone? Can we still love him without having known him as did the first disciples? The words of our gospel lesson this morning serve to prop up a drooping community, to bring them back from the brink of despair. The words flow down the centuries to remind us of the enduring presence in the church of the departed Jesus. The key word here, as you might have guessed, is love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love. If you love me, keep my commandments. I have said these things to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. The members of John's community didn't have to manage this by themselves. We don't have to manage it by ourselves. Jesus reminds us that we are no longer servants, but friends, and that he has made known to us everything that he had from the Father. And as disciples, we are commissioned to share in the revealing of God and God's ways to the world. The coming of the Spirit will ensure that through the disciples, the revelation of God does not end with Jesus' death or his return to God. Disciples in all ages and all places can share in the work of Jesus through the work of the Spirit, who brings the presence of Jesus to the community of faith. Jesus' original disciples followed his own model of love, making it possible for relationship with Jesus to extend beyond the first generation of believers. Relationship with Jesus does not depend upon physical presence, but on the presence of the love of God in the life of the community. This love of God is present whenever those who love Jesus keep his commandments, when they continue to live out the love that Jesus showed them in his own life and death. How are we to live in love? How are we to participate in Christ's work? How might that have looked for John's community, and how might it look for ours? If we take a moment to think about some of Jesus' words and actions, we can find some hints. Let's start with making 300 gallons of wine for a wedding party. Inviting Nicodemus, an important person, to be born again, to start over. Feeding 5,000 people in the wilderness, and don't forget those 12 baskets of leftovers. Healing of the man born blind, raising Lazarus to new life. In all these events, Jesus invites us to participate in God's generosity, to nurture fresh starts and new beginnings, to share with those in need, to see with new eyes, and to bring life to that which was dead. Lutheran pastor Barbara Lindblad offers us some additional help. She says, "Years ago I read something odd. The reason mountain climbers are tied together is to keep the sane ones from going home." Now, whoever said that was playing with us a bit, for we know that mountain climbers are tied together to keep from getting lost or going over a cliff. But there's another piece of truth here. When things get tough up on the mountain, when fear sets in, many a climber must be tempted to say, "This is crazy, I'm going home." The life of faith is like that. Doubts set in. Despair overwhelms us, and the whole notion of believing in God seems crazy. And Jesus knew that his disciples would have days like that. He knew that we would have days like that. So he told them and us that we're tied together like branches on the vine, or like climbers tied to the rope, tied together by the Spirit, to trust in the one who is always more than we can understand, to keep us moving ahead on the journey of faith, to encourage us when believing seems absurd. "I will not leave you orphaned. I am coming to you." The promise was not only for Jesus' original disciples, but for you and for me. The Spirit ties us to Jesus. We feel a tug on the rope whenever we are tempted to settle for answers that may seem to make more sense, but cannot give life. Christ is risen. Is risen indeed.